Welcome to the Militia Gaming community. I'm Trigger, and I've got a drift leaderboard for you, as well as a 2008 Nissan 350Z S-tier drift build. Let's go. Alright, just a quick shout out to Don Shogun for submitting this build on militiagamingco.com. You can go submit yours for testing by going there and clicking on the builds page. Alright, so I've decided to put together a leaderboard of sorts for drift builds based on how well they score in the drift playlists. There are a couple of things that I need to highlight so that you don't get the wrong idea about this leaderboard. The first is driver error has a huge impact on the scores that these cars are capable of. So with that in mind, I tried my best to not only drive the best I possibly could, but also decided to do a bunch of runs before actually calling it good on these scores. By the way, these leaderboards can be found on my Need for Speed Unbound spreadsheet. Link is on the militiagamingco.com website. Basically, I take a potential build and get comfortable with the setup by running it through a few playlists. Then when I'm ready to start recording the scores, I run it through the Streets on Fire playlist for S tier builds or the Mo Grip Mo Problems playlist for A+ tier 3 separate times. I record the scores for all of the events within those 3 playlists and then come up with an average score for each of those events. Then I take the average of those 3 averages, and that's the final score that I use to compare it to other cars in the class. By doing it this way, I'm limiting the driver error. However, I'm not eliminating it. So when you look at the leaderboard, keep in mind that the cars whose averages are fairly close to each other could easily swap places on the leaderboard depending on the driver and the run that you have. So with that said, let's get into this 350Z build. First, it ranks second on my list so far for S-tier builds with an average score of 79,898. The only car that I've been able to consistently score higher with is the Z06 Corvette. Of course, there are so many more cars to test and build, so this is something that's going to be a work in progress. This 350Z has a couple of characteristics that make it tough to drive, but this build does a great job at combating those to give you a fairly smooth experience. The most frustrating one being that it's super twitchy, meaning it wants to swing super hard every time you go into a transition, which makes it tough to sustain those longer drifts with slightly less angle and more speed. You need to be able to do those types of drifts if you want to score high, because the score is based on the distance you travel while drifting, as well as the speed and the angle. So if you've got a really crazy angle, which is what this car likes to do, but no speed and no distance, the score gained will be less than with a sort of mediocre angle and lots of speed and distance. You want a combination of all 3 of those things if you want to score the highest. Anyways, with this build, you can achieve it fairly easily once you're used to the car. Give it a few playlists to see how sensitive the steering is, and you'll start to adjust and score a lot higher. I strongly recommend having the steering sensitivity at -5, which is the lowest it can go. This car feels like a completely different car in a good way when you have it like that. The other thing to note is that throttle control will need to be practiced, particularly when it comes to transitioning. If you want a quick transition, you should let off the throttle, steer the car to the opposite side, and then get back on the throttle. The car will swing really hard and really fast, so you're gonna need to counter steer so you don't over rotate at that time, but that's great for really short, really tight transitions that you need in a hurry. If you keep the throttle pinned and just steer it through the transition, it's going to be slower and smoother. However, that could actually hurt you in the tight switchback type spots of these drift events. Just try to judge how much space you have for the transition and then use the technique that best fits that area of the track. Aside from that, I think this build is a great fit for both manual and automatic users. So if you have any questions about this, don't hesitate to send me a DM on Instagram, Twitter, or Discord. Shout out to all the Heat 5 members of the channel. I'll catch you on the next one. Trigger out.